ask you. There you go. So you'll have to just say got it or leave. But hopefully if anybody needs, like, please don't, just put anything in chat and we'll stop. Okay.
Yeah. So anyways,
Yeah.
we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. I know it's kind of yet another crazy Wednesday in our lives, and I'll apologize for my background noise because there's all sorts of chaos going on at my house. I'm sure there is at yours too, which is why we're all here to manage the chaos. But we're really excited. The PTA is excited that Leanne Bloom, who is a Montclair parent, but is also an occupational therapist professional, has agreed to join us tonight and talk through some tips and give us some kind of different ways of thinking about how to manage our kids and to manage all those tasks around that we're constantly struggling through. So I will hand this over to Leanne. Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah. Thank you for being with me here tonight. This is definitely a piece of passion for me, parenting. It's very personal work and it's also professional work that I do too. And I'm excited to share these things with you too. And it's just going to be a very kind of fast-paced thing. And if you have questions, I'll save time for the end for questions. And of course you can put stuff in the chat too. And if you are thinking of things as you're kind of going and you don't want to forget, like use the chat and then I can go back and look at that later too. And anyways, we're going to just get started with a little tidbit that I will do with some of my kids too. This is, okay, let me just make sure I'm showing the right thing. Do you see, let's see, make sure that let me actually just stop it really quick and make sure I'm doing the right thing because it looks strange on my end. There, okay. Okay, I think that's still right. Okay. So this is a technique called 5-4-3-2-1, and it just kind of helps us ground us in this present moment. Before we even start, we're going to start with grounding. So just to yourself, think about 5 things that you can see around yourself, and I'll kind of guide us through this. So I can see the trees out my window. I can see my lamp. I have an air diffuser going. I can see a green light on my camera, and I can see a computer screen. 4 things I can touch the keyboard, my desk. I'm gonna touch my coffee cup and my mouse. And then I'm thinking about things I can hear. I can hear the clock ticking. I can hear the air diffuser, and I can hear myself talking. 2 things I can smell. I can smell my tea, and I can smell I put some fragrance in the air for calming. And then 1 thing that you can taste, and this is kind of a tricky one because you might not have food in your mouth right now, but you might have remnants of food, or you might think about food that you want to eat or have eaten in the past. Just kind of a quick little thing. Anyway, just take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and notice how you're feeling in this moment, if you're focused or distracted, and what emotions you might be feeling, and if there's anything that you need to stay grounded right now. Calming tools, maybe you need your water, maybe you need to get a stretch break, maybe you need to turn off your camera and go walk around. Just take care of yourself. That's the most important thing. So I start with this question to kind of ground us too. Do you ever find yourself wondering, why does my child require so much prompting to get them to do typical tasks like brush their teeth or cleaning up toys? If I could only get my kid to do what was expected. Well, that's very common, and you're not alone. Many parents struggle with their kids, and we don't have training for the hardest job that we've ever had to do. So who am I? I am Leanne Bloom. I'm an occupational therapist by trade. I'm also known as Sebastian's mom. I'm also an owner of Oak Bloom OT, and I work with sensitive children, and my goal is for them to live their lives to the fullest and be the best version of themselves that they can be. So that can mean lots of different things. Mostly I work with play and crafts and kind of interest-based activities. And we'll kind of talk more about that too. Also, just full transparency, I'm not perfect and I get many things wrong. So I'm still here to learn and forgive myself and teach this work with my child and the children that I work with. So this training is called Skills to Parent. It's a guide to parenting from a place of understanding by building relationships and reframing behavior for a happier, well-balanced household. Yeah, and just as a side note, I use the word parent as a way of describing the transactions that take place between child and adult. This is a guide for anyone working with little ones. It can be parents, children, parents, teachers, staff, aunties, uncles, etc. So what I hope that you'll gain is a deeper place of understanding and empathy, and decreasing the meltdowns, the timeouts, and really understanding behavior and what that might mean, and what it is and what it isn't. And so in short, we're talking about this 3R approach that I developed. It's relationship first strategies, resourcing ourselves, putting our oxygen masks on first, and having reasonable expectations. And that really looks a little bit deeper at behavior and what behaviors might be telling you. Yeah. And so what happens when you use this approach is you'll have a happier, calmer, and healthier household. That's the idea, that's the hope. But it's a process and it takes some time to practice and to get into this more optimal state of being. Nobody gets it right the first time, and every single parenting book I've ever read says something like this, like nobody does it right, even the people that are writing the material. And it's much harder than it looks. It takes lots and lots of practice. And so even when you think you're doing all the things right, it doesn't mean that meltdowns won't happen, especially if you're raising a neurologically diverse child. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means that you're having a human experience. And so let's reframe our shortcomings and learn how to repair when our children, when we've acted non-optimally as well. So just talk a little bit about what behavior is, it's typically used, this word is typically used to describe something negative that's happening with the situation. However, I like to reframe that and just think about behavior as a form of communication. There's a quote by Dr. Ross Greene that I love. It's, kids do well if they can, not because they wanna. And I really live by this as much as I can. But just note that behavior continues beyond what you feel you can handle. And sometimes that there's a sign that there might be something deeper going on. And sometimes that's a mismatch between temperaments, between parents, caregivers, and child. And that there also might be a neurological difference that influences the ability for the brain to regulate. So you may benefit from the help of a professional too. We're here to assist and make things a little bit easier, and you don't have to do this alone. So behavior is, any hitting, refusing kind of reactions to the nervous system is like fight, flight, freeze. And a child may want you to feel what they feel, and this is why they do it. It can be a communication for to give you more information for what's hard for the child. And then we can learn the skills of pausing in that moment too. And what it's not is a child trying to be bad, because they want to do well. So sometimes you just need to armor up and set a boundary as well, because when children are having these behaviors. So I want to give you an example of a family that I might work with. And this is kind of a melding of various families that I've worked with and a typical case study. I've worked with kids from very young, preschool, even babies, but typically it's like preschool to middle school is typically the kids I work with. And sometimes they'll bring me in at preschool. And for Julia, she was having, quote, problem behavior. She would throw things, hit her brother, refuse to go to do schoolwork. And even though the schoolwork was just at the right level. And in preschool, Julia was kicked out of 2 other preschools due to aggression. And when Julia got to elementary school, parents would get calls from the school for Julia acting out and sent to the principal's office, that kind of thing. And then at home, parents are trying many different things for Julia, rewards, timeouts, taking toys, and nothing seems to be working. That's typical, I'll get called in at one of those stages, either from the school or from the family. And so I kind of use these ideas of Julia and those kinds of kids that I work with throughout, including my own family, by the way. So this idea is this relationship and feeling resourced and having reasonable expectations. It's kind of a cycle that they are all interchangeable in some ways, they intersect. And so there's a lot of overlapping qualities and strategies. So you might hear the same strategy for a different R. So for relationship, resourced, and reasonable. So just keep that this kind of visual in mind as we're kind of going through. But first I want to talk about relationship, because that's where I always start with the kids that I work with. And also when I'm realizing there's a breakdown between in a relationship, communication, and there's behavior. So I'll kind of go through each one of these things, but basically it's connection, name it to tame it, and then really sharing your feelings. So first off, having interest-based play, following their lead, 10 to 20 minutes every day is kind of the standard, and that comes from the positive parenting model and hand-in-hand parenting. They're following their lead is another approach called DIR. It's floor time is the model that I use in my practice. And so we want to build rapport with the child and follow whatever they're interested in. What can you learn from them and what can you create together? Are they interested in Legos, Minecraft, puzzles, Superman? Just follow them and see where it goes, and then add your ideas into the play. You'll learn so much about your child you're working with. And then that builds relationship, it builds trust, and that trust is established. And then as you've established that trust, then they can start to learn to follow you too. And then you can add even more like complicated things to the play. I just want to give you an example of how this worked for me in a child that I worked with. I was working in the school system, and he was only writing 1 sentence words. He was in 3rd grade, and I was as an occupational therapist. And I found an in with him was Pokemon, and we would do Pokemon drawings, and then he would start like drawing the Pokemon cards and tracing them, and then I worked it up to the point where he would get that as a reward at the end after his writing. And sometimes he would write about Pokemon as well. And by about 6 months, he was writing 5 to 7 sentences just by using this idea of interest-based activities. And how important that is to build in that relationship. So connect and redirect is a strategy that I first learned about from the book No Drama Discipline by Dr. Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. And the true story, I read these books as a professional and then tried it at home. That sounds so beautiful. And this idea of like, just instead of command and demand, like, there's this child says, I I hate my homework, and, mom says, what are you doing out of bed? Go back to your room. I don't want to see you again until morning. And then the connect strategy is, Mom, you never leave me a note in the middle of the night, and I hate homework. Same words. And then she says, I get frustrated about things like that too. Want me to leave you a note tonight? I have some ideas about homework, but it's late now. Let's talk more tomorrow. So what I wanted to share too is that I tried that, like, oh, I get frustrated, and try to connect and get on his level and do all of these things with the child, but it didn't work for mine. And I kind of gave up and went back to what I knew, which was kind of shaming, blaming, threatening, timeouts, taking toys, even with my own. And I'm sharing this with you in a very vulnerable way, because this, being vulnerable with you right here is also establishing trust as well. So adding emotion to, my heated emotion to it actually elevates everybody's emotions. And if you think about emotions as being contagious, they're, you're reacting to their emotion, they're reacting to yours, and then it just kind of spirals. So think about what fear might be playing into the situation, such as, like, if my child's acting out now in this way, will they wind up with any friends at all? And, I can't take him anywhere, and that kind of thing. That's really fear kind of getting in the way of this strategy working as well. However, I will say sometimes it works. Sometimes you take away the toys, you send them to the room, and it works. And, why that works is shame is actually a really powerful way to shut someone down. And if you shame a dog or any other creature, they cower, they stop, they freeze. It kind of it goes to this ancient system in the brain where it just shuts it down. But it doesn't create connection. So if we can think about that when we're trying these different techniques that are hard when you first start, but I promise you that over time, it does start to work more. So the strategy is to first comfort them and make them feel safe, validate their feelings by, saying, oh, I hear you feeling frustrated, and just listening to what they have to say. And actually, the key is to not talk at all. And that's a really important piece to just think about when we're doing it. And it's so hard to do. Again, it's easier said than done. And then just repeating back, if when you are going to say something, wait for them to finish and then say it back. And if you don't have to be creative at all, you can just say, I hear you don't want to go to bed, or I hear you don't want to pick up your toys, or I hear the food is gross, and whatever they're saying to you, just repeating it back directly is good. So the timing of when we say things is important too. So sometimes you need to wait a minute for the emotions to ride out before saying anything. And sometimes it can happen the next day, and that's okay too. Like in this comic illustration, she says, let's talk more tomorrow. That's just kind of calming the brain down. And so also for this to work is naming it to tame it. So validating their feelings, actually using the emotion words to validate their feelings. So what do they say? Like, instead of dismiss and deny, you're kind of not validating their feelings. You're saying, like, she says, I fell and hurt my knee. Mom says, don't cry. It's okay. Don't be sad. You're fine. Just be more careful. And then same thing. I fell and hurt my knee. That can hurt. I saw you running and you tripped and scraped your knee. What happened? Or like, that must have hurt. Or, tell me more how you're feeling. And then you get more words from her. Okay, mommy, come. That's right. I held you and rocked you. Do you feel better? Yes. Do you want to show me how it happened? And she says, yes. So you'll get more words from them about what's happening too. And this can happen, by the way, for teenagers and things like that, kids that aren't talking as much, to really just ask an opening question, like, tell me more, or I hear that's hard. What's up? It's a way for them to just start speaking more. One way to think about how you're going to name it and their feelings is the using an emotion word. And it's good to familiarize yourself with different emotion words. Here's like a little emotion wheel. And there's lots and lots of different styles of ways of going about this. I also use the zones of regulation. This I kind of have the kids kind of pick out what they're feeling, and then, you know, what zone they're in, and then how they want to stay in the green zone, or how to get into the green zone. And that can be like a tool or strategy that we're working on in OT. A lot of times it's like coping skills and things like that too can work really well. And there's lots of different programs out there, you know, Go Zen, Generation Mindful, Ninja, Life Hacks. Those are all just a few that I use. And I kind of use them interchangeably depending on the client and what the, you know, what I feel like they'll best respond to. So next I want to talk about resourced parenting. What does that mean to be resourced? Well, it's kind of like an internal thing, how you're feeling in your body as an adult. And do you have the capacity to then be there for your child? There's it's that oxygen mask first kind of idea. You actually really do need to be in a calm place to interact. So having boundaries for yourself, you know, a whole topic on boundaries, could have a whole dedicated presentation to it. But let me just state that boundaries are not just controlling other people, like telling them what to do and things like that. Setting a boundary is actually controlling your reaction and your body. So that it might look like removing yourself from a situation and saying, I will not tolerate being spoken to that way. Or you can ask them, you know, to try again. You know, that didn't feel good. Can you try again? And ask yourself, what are your non-negotiables? Is it having a clean house, or saying a child that says please and thank you? For certain kids, it's different things. You know, the basics is safety, right? Like, I want to keep my body safe. I want to keep my space safe. And so that's like number one. It's great when you have a kid that you don't have to worry about that with, but a lot of the kids that I work with, and even in my own home, sometimes the safety is paramount. So what can you do to resource yourself so that you can feel better as a parent? Self-care kind of gets a bad rap. No one has time for self-care. My child's in crisis. I have to go to work. It feels selfish, but self-care doesn't mean just going to the spa or going to a yoga class, although it can be. But it can be really simple ways of finding time to yourself, a quiet morning, a longer walk home, putting your headphones in while you parent or even cook or do chores, talking to a friend, and just spending time by yourself, having dedicated time. And notice next kind of how you're feeling in your body, and if you are feeling resourced or not. Like, you know, maybe work's really hard and you don't, you know, you don't feel so resourced, or maybe your child's struggling or sick, you don't have the resources. So what can you do in those moments to find a way of digging in and doing something for yourself? So what will that look like in action when you're actually setting a boundary or doing something with your child? Maybe they're having behavior, you know, not taking it personally is a big piece of it. It's not an assault against your parenting. You didn't do anything wrong. Often it's something that they're feeling. Sometimes it's something that happened at school and you have no control over it. So remember that it's not your fault, and you don't try not to take it personally. You might need to take physical space, especially if you're feeling triggered, so that you're not reacting in a way. Sometimes I'll be in the red zone and I'll need to just take some space. And I may say that like, you're not in trouble, but I'm angry right now. You know, that the relationship with a child can differ depending on what they emotionally need each day. And if they have siblings, if you have other children, that you may need to dedicate, your energy in different ways, depending on where they're at emotionally. That there's a book I like called Siblings Without Rivalry, and they talk about just giving each child what they need, and it's not always exactly the same across the board. Using play and humor, it gets a long way. I love this because it's fun, and you know that you're doing it right when you're laughing. When you yourself are having a good time, the kid is definitely having a good time too. And ways that you can do that is obstructing access or play, like, taking the toy from them as they're trying to play and look at them like, I gotcha kind of thing. Or acting confused, like, oh, what is she trying to do? I have no idea, or being exaggerated using affect. It's called like a bigger facial expressions, or using a funny accent. I don't know about that, sir, or something like that would be fun. Or sing it out. You could say, I don't want to do that today, or whatever song you like. Race Against the Clock is another one I like how long is it going to take you to put your pajamas on? I'm going to see how fast you can do this, or let's have a race. I'm going to see who can put their day clothes on first. And then just remember, when emotions are elevated, less words are better. So saying little there when you're up against that emotionality of a child. So having reasonable expectations. When in doubt, zoom out. We have a hard time seeing the bigger picture when we're feeling triggered or upset. And so what will help you get a better perspective? Sometimes it's talking to a friend, sometimes it's taking some space, that boundary piece of it. And when the behavior is happening, remain curious. What is the behavior telling you? What can you learn from the situation? Oh gosh, he hasn't eaten, or he's been out with friends and is tired. He just came from a birthday party, he's off his routine, there's a time change. There's all kinds of reasons why behaviors happen. But you can ask questions that'll help you stay curious too. Like, I noticed you've been having a hard time with math. What's up? And this comes from Dr. Ross Green's book on the explosive child. And he'll ask questions like that, just like, what's up? I noticed this, and what's up with that? And I literally asked this question last week to my second grader, and he was having a hard time with math. And it turns out that some of the kids were finishing their math really fast, and then they get screens afterwards. And he was really frustrated that he was slow, and he felt like he was being punished for being slow. So he just would refuse to do it at all. So, but I wouldn't know that unless I asked, like, what was going on with that. And when a child is dysregulated, yelling, protesting, or shutting down, again, just a reminder to stay quiet. And I think about approaching a dog who is barking and shouting at you or jumping up on you excited. You wouldn't start shouting at the dog and coming angrily at the dog and aggressively at the dog. When you want to communicate safety, you would want to get down low on their eye level, or even lower, depending on how heightened their dysregulation is. And you use a really soft, gentle voice. You might lower your voice, and you tilt your head a little bit. You might open your hand, have a really open approach, like physically, like you want to communicate non-verbally, because sometimes, again, the words they're not going to go through. So you might want to just listen and be open to listening, kind of sitting back and kind of being present with them. Let the emotion kind of take its course. However, a boundary might still need to be set. Again, if there's safety concerns, you may need to remove the child out of the area, or you may need to take your own personal precautions. One thing I think about this training I did around working with aggressiveness, and she said, okay, when you're setting a boundary, just like mentally, you kind of armor up, like, okay, boundary needs to be set. So armor up, and you kind of stand tall, take a deep breath. And I kind of imagine, it's kind of silly, but visualizing a shield that kind of goes down over me, and I'm good. Like insults, whatever, they're not going to penetrate the deeply. I'm setting a boundary. We can talk about it more later if there's insults and things like that are happening. But sometimes it's just, yep, and this needs to happen. And we still need to put our shoes on. We still need to go to the doctor's office, whatever is happening there. Sometimes a compromise can be available within reason. You don't want to get them too wound up in this, like negotiating forever. But stating boundaries within reason, I think, is totally acceptable. And having family agreements so that you can refer back on this is another great way. In the moment, the heat of a moment, you can turn back on, well, this is our agreement. And so having a family agreement ahead of time is great. So if you're anticipating, or if you've noticed a problem, then you can then talk about possible solutions to that problem, because often there is a reason, and there's possible solutions to it. So here's a copy of the agreement game that I got from my own parent coach from Wits End Parenting. And it's just to kind of go around in a circle if you're at a family dinner table type of thing, and you say with one thing positive from your day. And then you have like the topic, right? Something like right now at my house, it's podcasts. It's like podcast central over here. And it's starting to get to a point where there's behavior associated to it. And so, well, what's important to me about this topic? It's important that we we have play. We're not just like sitting there zoned out listening to a podcast. Even though I value you learning Greek gods, I don't value just sitting there for hours on end, not doing anything. So it's important that I express my values in that, and maybe even having our own values as a family is an important part of this work too. And then so you can just kind of go through, and you can say one thing that is a value to you, and kind of go through and repeat it through each person that's at the dinner table, and then why it's hard. It's hard for me because I want you to have imaginative play. And when you get off the podcast, there's behavior, you're shouting no, and you're not getting your routine done. So that's feeling hard. And what should we do about it? Like, let's brainstorm ideas. I have some ideas. We set a timer. Maybe mom or dad has another idea, or sister, brother, a sibling has another idea of what we should do. And we write them all down, and everybody's voice is important. Sometimes it's important to have a talking stick too during this time, because people get excited and they're, have all the great ideas. Especially if you're dealing with any kind of impulsivity, and then writing it down what your agreement is, and then signing it. Like, it's a document, it's a living document that you can refer back to later if and when you need to. So next, I want to talk about what reasonable expectations might be, and there's like exceptions to this. And once we have this agreement, established rules, exceptions can be made, some flexibility there. So sometimes we need to make an exception, like the context of the situation, maybe that had happened before, or maybe you want to maybe you need to work more and you need to just have the podcast like babysitter, or the screen babysitter, or whatever. Did they have a friend over, and did they sleep well? And You can say something, if you are making an exception, you can say, well, since you've had a really big day, let's just clean up your toys tomorrow. It's fine. When do you think you'll be able to do it? And, maybe coming up with a different agreement of when the thing is going to happen. And then just a note about rigidity that comes from fear. And often my own work around this has been noticing how fear can kind of get in the way and of my own rigidity around, the toys getting cleaned up, for example. Like once the toys, they're not getting cleaned up, and they're going to be on the floor, and I'm going to be distracted by them, and then I'm just going to end up cleaning them up, or I'm going to step on a Lego piece, or whatever is happening. I get like, no, we're doing this thing, and it gets really intense. And again, the emotions can escalate too. So just kind of check in with yourself again, that self-care resource piece. Like, do you have the capacity to actually set a limit right now? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just have had a big long day, and you need to not be setting limits right now, or maybe having somebody else step in if that's available. And forgiveness and grace. Giving yourself grace will also help your child remember how to give grace to themselves. So we all make mistakes, and when they're having these reactions or behavior, then you can model what that looks like, and you can model it for yourself as well. So maybe I'm trying to set a limit, but I'm it's 8 o'clock at night and I haven't eaten yet, and I'm tired, kiddo's tired, and I'm trying to set a limit and I lose it. I just start shouting, then maybe stopping and realizing in that moment, or coming back later. And what that might look like is giving yourself some grace. So what do we do when there's been a transgression? Allowing for do-overs is one way. When a child has done something non-optimally, have them practice what it looks like to meet our expectations. Then they really know what it looks like, and they can try better next time. And note that you don't always have to do this in the moment, especially when emotions are high. You can wait until it's calmed down and kind of go through it another time. Part of discipline is teaching. So, the word discipline comes from the word to teach in Latin. So, so we want to be like just thinking about that in the back of our minds as we're kind of going through this too. So, noticing what emotions were present, taking a moment to reflect, what's in the context of this, like for yourself and for the child. Maybe emotionally, you're having a disagreement with a friend, or maybe your child is being left out at recess and they're having a harder time with their resilience. Just kind of keep that in mind too. And so how do we apologize and repair with others? The repair piece is different for different people. And I don't know if you've heard about the love languages, but there's 5 different love languages, like quality time, gifts of appreciation, words of affirmation, and actual gifts. And then I'm forgetting one more. But anyway, it's like you want to give the kind of care and repair in the way that it's going to be received. So for example, maybe I really am a words of affirmation person. I really like praise. And so if there's been maybe a child has threw a toy, and the way that they can repair with me is to verbally say. They don't need to write it out. They don't need to like do anything special other than to just tell me that that they're sorry and that they appreciate me. Or something like that. Maybe they're not going to say appreciate. Maybe they'll say, I love you, mommy. That's fine. I'll take it. Or like even just looking at you in a certain way will communicate that like I care about you. And that can go both directions. If you have had a maybe you've raised your voice or acted non-optimally, what's a way that your child's going to receive that? If they are not a words of affirmation person, like maybe their love language is, physical touch, that was the other one. Maybe it's like physical touch. They need hugs and comfort and things like that. Or maybe it's quality time. Maybe there's an activity you both can enjoy. So how to rebuild trust. Family meetings, I think, are great, and letting the child problem solve what's going to work best next time. And then if we're behaving non-optimally, it's an opportunity for us to show how to make amends in a timely way. Come to your child when you're both ready. And you can say, I'm sorry I reacted in that way. I'm overtired and overworked. And it doesn't excuse the way I reacted. How was that for you? And just listen to how your child's feeling, and then sharing how your feelings there too. I just want to share a slide. I'm going to skip through because there's like a couple of slides in between. But what I want to do is share this, how to apologize. And what it is and what it isn't. We can say you're sorry and why it was wrong. How can you make it better? Taking responsibility, trying not to do it again, and in ways that you would do that, asking for forgiveness. Will you accept? And sometimes people aren't ready. Some people are not ready to apologize, and some people aren't ready to accept the apology. So just keeping that in mind, and common things are like to say, I'm sorry, but you were really terrible, and I kind of blaming them again. So you misunderstood, or it was your fault that I stepped on the toy and I was angry. So let's kind of keep that in mind too. Sharing your feelings is a great way to let them learn about their own emotions. This strategy works well with all relationships, adults, and everybody in between, coworkers. Timing's super important too. So you might find another time to do this and check in to see if they're even ready to talk. And regular check-ins are important, but we want to try to use I statements. And that would be like saying, I'm feeling frustrated when there's toys on the floor. I've asked you to clean them up before 7:30 and now it's 8 o'clock. So, and this comes from Marshall Rosenberg's work on nonviolent communication. And there's a whole curriculum that's like associated with that. I encourage you to check it out if you're interested in communicating more effectively with your people. Saying something, how it makes you feel. It creates that vulnerability, which will allow the other person to be vulnerable as well. Brene Brown has done a bunch of work around this, around sharing vulnerability first. It creates that invitation for others to share. And then giving a child a chance to see your perspective. Sometimes you want to share a little bit more information about what's happening, and so that they don't do something because it has a negative consequence down the line. And then this also models how to communicate and increases their emotional vocabulary. So, and do this part as part of the repair, and when at a regulated time. So you wouldn't want to do this necessarily with, when you're both feeling in the yellow zone, for example. And so when we are sharing our feelings, this is a little visual I found that I thought was really touching. And just to say, like, kind of naming what's in the context, like I'm feeling this, and, telling the story about it, taking a deep breath, kind of getting in touch with our body, And touching your heart will help, you know, naming the present body sensations will help you identify actually what emotions you feel too. Taking a deep breath again, and then touching your belly and naming the needs that underlie the not being met, the needs that aren't being met. And there's a whole list of needs too from this work based on the Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, all the needs, and then like making requests and things like that. That's the apology. And then parenting exceptional children. I put this slide in because this is a lot of the children that I work with, and I think, you know, my child is kind of one, it falls into this category too, is you have like this expectation of yourself and what you should be doing as a parent. And so, you know, dropping those expectations, that kind of goes into that reasonable expectations. Sometimes it's actually not reasonable to ask your child to put their clothes on in a timely manner. It's just not reasonable. Or asking a child, I had a family I was working with that had a teenager that didn't want to do the same activities. Like this family, it's like, it's fun activities. We were going to the museum, we're going to the beach, we're doing all this fun stuff, and they're just not doing it. And it's like, well, if you ask, have you remain curious, like what happened? Were you, you know, did you ask her why she didn't want to go? And like, I've noticed that you don't want to come join us for family outings. What's up? You know, and a lot of times with neurodiversity, you know, boredom is a big deal and sensory is a big deal. And so understanding a little bit more on a deeper level, like what's going on for them and where they can actually meet that expectation is helpful. Again, the self-care for yourself, being resourced, having activities, I would say like find 2 activities a day and try to check them off. You can even calendar it if that makes sense to you. So we have a nervous system, and emotions are contagious. So it's important that we come into a heated situation very calm and let them feel love. I kind of mentioned that then in their own love language. Noticing when the patterns of behavior are happening. Are there certain times of day or certain triggers that we want to look out for? And setting limits in a way that doesn't feel like punishment, inserting yourself directly into their line of view. Sometimes it's getting right there on their level and touching them and saying, hang on a second, I need you to stop, look at me. And, you know, you can kind of set a boundary like that too. And for specific children, having a tools for children, having a sensory diet, rich lifestyle, like using movement and the senses in a way that helps you live a full, rich life, can really help the child de-escalate and get in touch with their nervous system. Often their nervous system is elevated. And so how are we bringing the nervous system back down, and figuring out what that looks like for each sense. Breathing, I love to do that and just make it part of your routine. You can do it at night before bed. You can do it in the car on your way to school. I got these cute little cards that are like different patterns, and, you know, kind of gives the breath work of, you know, you breathe in, breathe out, hold, breathe in, breathe out, hold. And there's a bunch of different ones. I mean, you can pretty much take any shape and turn it into a breath. But basically the idea is to breathe in and breathe out and hold. And there's different patterns you can do around that has different effects, actually, cognitively. Having these cognitive strategies of using an inner coach, like, you know, you got this, you could do it. Pausing and letting, playing it through, like, well, how would that make me feel if I did this? And then also I have a child who was like, no, 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 I'm not going to do anything. You know, do you want to try to do this? No. And it's partly because they don't know how to do it, or they're afraid of failing. And so I call it the power of yet. Well, you don't know how to do it yet, or let's, you know, let's try it. So, and then we can also think about the size of the problem and how to fix it. I'll just, yeah, I'm gonna breeze through that. Okay, and then just to recap, relationship, resourced, and reasonable. Relationship, building that connection time in every day, before redirecting behavior, connecting with their emotional brain, you know, like using words, you know, to describe how they're feeling. Feeling resourced within, coming in calm, and that emotion will be felt by them. They'll be able to co-regulate with you in that. And then what's reasonable, and what is the behavior telling you? So having a reasonable expectation of your child and having that match with what they're able to do in the context of everything that's gone into this. Like, have you spent time with the child? Are they having difficulty with a friend? Are you asking them to do something that is slightly beyond their comfort level? So continue thinking about all of that. I want to open it up for questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share, and I'll stop the recording.